Hey guys, in this video, I have Ken, an American attorney, on my show tonight. There's a lot of unanswered questions about cohabitation, marriage, and how to protect your assets, not only in the Philippines, who FilipinoCupid did a video on, but also on the side of America and the United States, and a little bit more information and some of the missing questions that still remain unanswered. Stick around. Okay, Ken, welcome back. I appreciate you coming on. I know FilipinoCupid came out with a video and brought up a lot of concerns for a lot of expats, and we want to set some of those fears at ease, possibly, and maybe talk a little bit about what people can do to protect themselves. So thank you for coming on, Ken.
You're very welcome. Glad to be here.
All right, so I guess we'll start off with, some information that you found, and then we'll at the end here we'll do a question and answer. We have some viewers who left some comments or some questions that they would like an answer on that we will or you will do your best to answer.
All right, let me just say this. I said it's good to be here, but at my age, it's good to be anywhere. The one thing to remember, I am an attorney in the state of Tennessee and not licensed to practice in any other state. And I certainly cannot give legal advice for the Philippines. So just think of me as an educated moderator or teacher that is just giving opinions on what I read in the law.
Perfect. Thank you. So what kind of information do you have to share with us about cohabitation and protecting your assets with the Philippines?
Well, the first thing to remember is that attorney Gracie, I think her married name is Bennett. I'm not positive, but I think so. I have consulted with her in the past over a legal issue in the Philippines. And for a young woman who has 5 years of experience, plus the experience that she had clerking in law firms while she was going through law school, she's a remarkable young lawyer and very knowledgeable. I am just totally impressed with her. So everything in that context. And when I say in this video that perhaps they should consult with an attorney, she would be a great one to consult with, I think, because she's got a definite major handle on these issues. All right, so the first thing I would do is we talk about those articles 147 and 148. So I'm just going to bring those up so we have it in front of us. This is part of the family code of the Philippines, and the article that was referenced is this Article 147. And basically it has to do with when a man and woman, and the woman has a capacity to marry, which means that she's not still married to somebody. Okay. And they live exclusively with each other as husband and wife without the benefit of marriage. So basically, when you're cohabiting, this section applies. And what I found was this section, the only time I've seen this section used, and I did some search of case law, and the only context in which I found these two articles being used was in the context of a contested annulment. And so even listening to the clarification of FilipinoCupid at the end of that last video, Gracie said that during her 5 years plus the time clerking for law firms, she's never heard of or seen a case where this was actually used. And that makes sense because what's in here is not enough to go after all by itself, with some exceptions. So okay. This statute just basically is about cohabiting. And it says their wages and salaries shall be owned by them in equal shares, and the property acquired by both of them through work or industry shall be governed by the rules of co-ownership. So it's a joint enterprise. in which it is presumed, and that's where we come to that important paragraph coming up. In the absence of proof to the contrary, that's an important factor. Properties acquired while they live together shall be presumed to have been obtained by their joint efforts and shall be owned by them in equal shares. And each person, whether they're working or not, shall be deemed to have contributed jointly. That's concept of like in marriage, where where you have joint property, and the fact that a wife is a stay-at-home mother or stay-at-home homemaker, that's valued equally with the wages that the husband earns. So that takes that context and applies it to people that are cohabiting. But it's a presumption in the absence of proof to the contrary. Now, Gracie mentioned that the only way to prove that would be by having the receipts of everything that you purchased before the marriage, but I don't think that's necessary. I think there's another way, and she just didn't think of it when she was put on the spot. And that way is, if you're going to move somebody in, just make a list of the stuff you own, and then have her sign it when she moves in. That's proof of what you had in before the cohabitation.
Oh, okay.
And then just whatever you have during that relationship, whatever you acquire is considered to be joint property. But like I said, I doubt very much if anybody would put the money into hiring a lawyer to sue for this thing, with two exceptions. There's one I'm going to come to in a moment, but the first exception is that if you purchase a condo during the marriage,
okay,
the presumption is that and say for you pay for it outright. The presumption is that equity in there is the joint property. That could be a sticky issue. A way to solve that is just simply purchase have your U.S. attorney, U.S. Lawyer, or your other country's lawyer draft a family trust for you. And so if you have a family trust or an irrevocable trust, then you just put the condo in that name, and that has the benefit of not only protecting your asset, but it also has the benefit that you don't have to it passes outside the will and go directly to who the other family members are. So you can put that provision in a family trust.
Okay.
The second way, I think we'll come to here shortly, but and that's a serious one for expats to consider. Okay. But an asset that you have, and I don't know if this would ever come up because I didn't see any cases involving foreigners in this case law, this Philippine Supreme Court case law that I read. I couldn't find one that included the foreigners, but in most countries, an asset is not just the object. So if you have a house in the United States, it's paid for or not paid for, and it's got equity in it. The asset is not the house with the debt. It is the equity in the house. So, so the increase in the equity from the date of marriage until the date of divorce is the real asset that's marital property. The same thing goes with 401ks. Now, she mentioned pensions. Pensions in most countries are not 401ks. Pensions in most countries have to do with just payments that you receive by a company or a government agency for the years you put in. It's not considered an asset because there's no account with the total amount in it. It's just they pay out. Now, most of the governments and companies have gotten rid of pensions in favor of 401ks just simply because they are great probably at the business they do, but they are not great at protecting the investments and making the pensions available. So, back in the 80s and 90s, there was a lot of issues with companies and governments running out of money to pay to keep up with the pension payments. So most every place you go has 401ks. Even the U.S. military has converted over to private retirement funds.
Yep.
So it's the increase in the equity, but most expats that are in the Philippines are probably depleting it. They're not contributing it to it anymore. So
Right.
if you're not contributing more to it during the relationship, during the cohabitation, then it's not building any joint equity in that. But homes can be another matter. So there's
Okay.
two ways to handle a home in the United States to protect that asset. Now, like I said, I doubt if this would come up anyway.
Right.
But you can't rely on my being doubtful that it would ever come up. I think I'm
Sure.
probably correct, but take it for what it's worth.
Mm-hmm.
But is it possible that a lawyer, if the Supreme Court has, or the courts have allowed you to go after assets that are in other countries, at least the United States gives full faith and credit to the orders of foreign countries. So a prenup that's made in the Philippines is enforceable in the United States. In fact, more enforceable than prenups that are made here in the U.S. And because we have an extra requirement for prenups in the United States that focuses on the issue of voluntariness in signing the prenup. And so as a practical stance, lawyers always need to have the opposing party, the other spouse, before they get married, to go see an attorney of their own and explain what it is, and then it can be enforced. But I've had cases, immigration cases, where prenups, a prenup from Brazil was enforced specifically exactly the way it was written, with according to Brazil law. It was totally enforced by our case law here in the United States. But that's one. Now with cohabitation agreements are not permitted in the Philippines. We have them here in the United States. And it's like a prenup, except for you're not married. Prenuptial, the nuptial part is marriage, only applies to marriage. But cohabitation agreements are disfavored because they don't want to favor people living together outside of marriage. They want people to be married when they live together. So those agreements are not enforceable. But two ways to protect a home: if a lawyer was to convince a court, and the court could legally order the 50% of the expats interest in an appreciation of any 401k, if there is one, or any equity in major assets. Then there's a way to protect it. If you just really want to be cautious, all you would need to do is take that home and transfer it into the family trust. There's another way to do it too, and that is if you're planning on leaving that home to, say, like your two kids. All you have to do is do a quitclaim deed to your kids before you cohabit. You do a quitclaim deed to the kids, but reserving for yourself a life estate. That means that the life estate is yours. You essentially own the possessory right of that property, including all rents and income coming from it. And the kids have title, but they can't do anything with it until you pass away and it transfers to them. So, when I have people coming in for wills, there's a lot of times the only thing they have is a house that they want to grant to someone. So I suggest to them, instead of paying for a will, just go to a title company and get a quitclaim deed with a life estate. So that's how they can protect those assets. The same goes with like a condo in the Philippines. If you really want to take that extra step and be careful, the first thing that you want to do is give Gracie or another attorney a call. You know, it's probably going to cost you less than $100 to talk to an attorney there to
Sure.
find out if there's Philippine law that protects you from the assets in the United States or from her getting any kind of appreciation of that condo. So if the condo appreciates in value during the cohabitation, you want to
Mhm.
make sure that that is not considered to be jointly held property. And
Okay.
that way you are protecting that assets, or just simply buy that condo in the name of the family trust.
Okay. Well, this is good information, and it's good for people to be aware of this, and maybe it will help them exercise a bit more caution. You know, maybe they will slow things down a little bit, and maybe they
Yeah.
won't be so quick to say, "Hey, why don't you move in?" or so quick to say, "Why don't you quit your job?" So, that's,
Yeah, I think as far as the 147, 148, the cases that are there just in the context of annulment and could there be a case involving assets and assets abroad? It's possible, but I think that's the least of your worries. I'd be more concerned about how you treat her and how you break up, and how you break up is critically important.
question one: do prenups work the same in the Philippines as they do in the States?
No, they work better.
They work better. They're
They
more
work better because a prenup in the state requires, in order to be sure that it's going to be enforced, has to address the issue of voluntariness on the part of the fiance. And so in order to do that, she needs to have her own attorney to sign off on the prenuptial agreement. But the prenuptial agreements that come from other countries are enforceable as they are under the Full Faith and Credit Act of the United States. They're enforceable and applied to the states. They're enforceable as they are if they've been drafted under the laws of that foreign country.
perfect. Um, I'm curious how that would apply getting married in the Philippines and living there, different laws. I'm assuming he's talking about the prenup, or I'm not sure. I'm not sure what he means by that. Maybe we'll pass on that question.
Well, I just might just add to it. If you're going to be
Sure.
living in the Philippines, um, if you've got a prenup in the United States, you're good.
Okay.
If you don't have one and you get married, there is such a thing in the United States as a postnuptial agreement, which means an agreement that you make after you get married. Now,
Okay.
again, you have to check with an attorney to find out if Philippines recognizes a postnuptial agreement, because there has to be some consideration, something of value, something that she's of value that she's gaining, like being able to stay married, that in order for that to be enforceable.
I don't know if you have the answer to this one because it may deal more with Philippines law, but if your living girlfriend passes away, can the family try to get her share of your assets?
Well, I think okay. The first part of that is strictly Philippine law that I don't know. That is a very good question. Does all of her? Well, let's think about it logically.
Okay.
She has a possessory right to half of the things that's accrued during the cohabitation, right?
Right.
All right. So when she dies and dies intestate, in other words, without a will,
Mhm.
then her heirs probably, I'm assuming, are her parents. And so it's possibility, but then again, I mean, that's what would make legal sense to me. But again, an attorney there would have to comment really fully on that.
Okay. Now, if you take a Filipina back to the States and marry her, how effective would a prenup be given that she will not be familiar with the concept? Could she overturn it later by claiming she was duped?
If the prenup was drafted in the Philippines under Philippine law and you
Mhm.
were both living there, and then you brought her back, that prenup would be valid here in the United States, or at least in my state. If you bring her on a fiance visa, 129F, and bring her back to the United States and then get married within the 90 days, and you do the prenup here, then it has to be done under US law, and there have to be two attorneys.
Okay. Let's see. If I have a 401k and a pension earned in the West prior to marriage, and I never commingle these assets, are they considered separate property?
Okay, now here in the United States, that's separate property. In the Philippines, I mentioned earlier about determining whether or not the courts will or can get the foreign assets of the opposing party or of the expat. So assuming that they could, then they could reach out to it. Like I said before, if the increase in the value of that is a marital property interest, then, okay, I'm assuming he's talking about being married there.
I think so.
If he's married there, then if the assets are reachable, the only thing that's an asset is the appreciation during that marriage. If they're cohabiting, I guess the answer is pretty much the same thing. If they're cohabiting, if she has the capacity to marry, in other words, she's not still married to somebody else,
Right.
or that their marriage was void under some of the particulars, like she was too young to marry, that kind of thing. So if it's reachable, it would be the same thing. If it's reachable through marriage, it would be reachable through Article 147 if it was to be, if there was a case to be made of it. And like I said, in cohabitation purposes, it's very unlikely that would come up anyway.
Okay. Now this next question, I think we've kind of answered, or you've kind of answered, perhaps the lawyer's view about how likely it is that a Filipino would use the cohabitation law. Are there any cases at all? I think you said you couldn't find any with foreigners.
Yeah, Gracie in her video with Filipina P said in her 5 years of practice, plus the additional time working with attorneys, which I presume was clerking during law school, said she'd never seen any. And when I was looking, as I looked through, I went through about 20 cases or so from the Supreme Court, and they were every one of them that I looked at had to do with contested annulments. So I doubt very much if it would ever come up.
Okay, just a few left here. Cohabitation. Is she entitled to 50% of your Social Security and pension that you earn during the time she lives with you? Example, she lives with you for 6 months. Is she entitled to 50% of your Social Security and pension you've earned during those 6 months?
Okay, so we address 401ks because the appreciation of that is the only asset that exists. Okay. The rest of it, if you're retired and you're draining it down, that rest of it is just income. Social Security is just income. It's not an asset. Okay. So pensions in the United States, pensions are government pensions or company pensions. Most of them have deviated away from pensions, and now your assets accrue either in a 401k or other parts or similar statutes set up, but in other words, private retirement funds. Those are assets, and those can be reachable depending upon Philippine law.
Okay. Again, I think I think you've answered this one. If bringing a Filipina to the U.S., is it better to have a prenup and marriage in U.S. or the Philippines?
It really doesn't matter where you get married. Okay. Bringing her as a petition for spouse, a petition for relative, or a petition for fiance They both take about the same amount of time. It's just the petition for a fiance is divided into two parts, where petition for relative is just one process. And whether or not you get the prenup in the United States or in the Philippines is dependent upon where you're living at the time. So if you are living in the Philippines at the time, and you at the time you get married, then it's better to have a prenup that is done under Philippine law and drafted by a lawyer there. And then that's enforceable. That's enforceable absolutely in the United States. Beware though, if you end up getting divorced in the United States, you're still you still can be on the hook for alimony. Well, you can still be on the hook for alimony by basically it's called, I'm basically calling it alimony, but the 40 credits or 10 years of your obligation to support, the affidavit of support, the contract you make, you would still be on the hook for that. But I have seen foreign prenups more effective, more enforceable than in fact, I did some legal research into it, and I found across the country that foreign prenups are, if they're done according to law, the United States gives full faith and credit to it, whereas prenups that are done in the United States still can be contested on the basis of voluntariness.
Okay.
So where they live when they get married is what I'm saying is where they should have the prenup done.
Okay.
Before they get married. Not after, before.
Before, okay. There's a couple of questions about purchasing property in the Philippines and how to protect it and things like that. And I'm assuming they probably should consult a Filipino attorney on that, unless you want to take a stab at it.
Well, there's only one part of it that I would comment on, and that would be if you have any concern that the condo or the house on the leased property or on her property that you paid for and are leasing back to you. If you have any concerns about that, the house part and the condo, you can have that put into an irrevocable family trust, so that it's not really yours anymore, because a trust is a separate entity in the United States anyway.
Okay.
And so having it in the name of a trust, and of course you'd have to communicate with an attorney whose expertise is in the area of estate planning, which mine is not. To draft it and give you all the ins and outs to it, of how and to what extent it can protect your property. But that would be the only comment that I would make. Otherwise, that is a Philippine lawyer question.
Okay. I think we got three more. I have military retirement earned in 2005, SSDI in 2011, VA disability 2007. All this was earned before a planned trip next year to the Philippines. If I stay, can a cohabitation entitle a Filipina for these benefits earned years ago? I think you kind of answered that already, but.
Yeah, well, the article says property. I do not believe that, well, in most places of the world, your income from VA, your income from Social Security, your income from 401ks, those are all income and not assets. And I presume it would be the same thing in the Philippines, that they can't get your income.
Okay. If I live on the rent collected from two properties back in Australia, now this is Australia, but in an income stream from my superannuation, are these assets untouchable? That's Australia. So,
well, the comment would be that yes, you have to contact a. Well, first of all, you would need to contact a lawyer in the Philippines to find out if if that would be reachable. I think, again, we're talking about income. We're not talking about the asset or if the asset is the question, the only thing that likely would be marital property would be the increase in the value during the marriage or during the cohabitation, even if that was reachable. And right now, I don't find anything that says that that would be reachable. So my thinking is, and Gracie could answer this better,
Sure.
if income reachable from a cohabiting relationship when you break up. My guess is not, but it's the same answer as before.
Okay. Last question. Sponsorship. If I treat a Filipina great and she chooses to leave, what are my financial responsibilities while married, divorced, example, rent?
If you're married and she chooses to leave, I guess it would come down to whether or not you took action to deprive her of, put her in a bad situation, commit economic abuse. And in that case, there is an order of protection law called Article 9262 that would come into play. And there could be restitution and penalties. But basically, if you treat her great and she chooses to leave, first of all, it shows that you probably did not have that great of a relationship to start with.
Right.
And if she chooses to leave, you may say that she's choosing her own consequences, and it may be that the barangay and the courts would see it the same way, but that would be a question for a Philippine lawyer again. But I think you're always better off doing the honorable thing, which is doing your best, even if she leaves you, to help her make the transition, whether that be to rehabilitate her with education or training or a skill or a little business or financial support, and maybe tutoring so she can pass the civil service exam.
Mhm.
But remember, the fact it becomes more complicated when they get to be over 35 years old, because somebody that's over 35 years old going to have a hard time finding a job. So that could be a little bit more precarious, and you absolutely need to talk to a Philippine attorney about your obligations then.
That's right. They definitely do have age discrimination here for hiring. When you're walking around in the malls or whatever, you'll often see 18 to 25 or 18 to 28 or it's amazing how they can really discriminate your color of skin, height. It's amazing what they discriminate against you.
Yeah, they've never had a civil rights action law there.
No. So before we'll go ahead and wrap this up, but before we had talked, you said it was amazing how all these questions, but people should be more concerned about maybe how to make their marriage work or things that they should do to. I think you had mentioned something like that.
Before you move in with somebody, you really need to get to know them. If you move in with somebody too quickly, I guess when expats go over there, a lot of expats have been through a bitter divorce, and they've been beat down their whole life, and they're feeling like, I'm coming here to this new country because there's an opportunity for a better life for me. The Filipinos are looking for a better life with you. You're looking for a better life with somebody who's going to appreciate you a whole lot more. I've never been treated better by anyone in my lifetime than I'm being treated by my Filipino wife. And so, but the thing is, it takes a long time to really get to know them. It takes months. And my advice not only as the husband of a Filipina, an old man of 71 that doesn't look a day over 98, who has experienced a lot in life, and my counseling education and background. My advice is no matter how lonely you are, don't cohabit until you get many months down the road. I would suggest 7 to 10 months. You can avoid almost all of these problems can be avoided if you take that time, because it takes that long for the walls to break down between you and to see what her true character is.
Very good advice. And I think with that, that's how we will end it. Ken, I appreciate your time as always. Thank you so much. We'll see you again, I'm sure, in another video.
You're very welcome.
Take it real soon.